on your old gray bonnet with the blue ribbon on it while I hitch old Dove into the chair. And through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on our golden wedding day. Put on your old gray.
The day after Christmas, Sunday, December 26, 1909, is a significant day for all the Kluck cousins. That's the day 26-year-old Frederick Christopher Kluck married 17-year-old Gladys Ellison at the home of her aunt Frances Teague in Perry, Oklahoma. Fred's family arrived in America in the decade before the U.S. Civil War. Married in 1853, Martin Friedrich and Anna Caroline Bethke Kluck immigrated with their infant daughter to the United States from a village near Colmar in the Prussian province of Posen. Because of its forests, mountains, and lakes, the region was called the Switzerland of Posen. Many Germans had left their native country in the 19th century to avoid Prussian militarism. If that was the reason for the Kluck's immigration, their hope of avoiding conflict was frustrated. In 1864, less than 10 years after his arrival, Martin Friedrich Kluck was drafted into the Union Army during the final year of the Civil War. His military service wrecked his health and probably shortened his life, but apparently it didn't affect his ability to sire children, 5 of whom were born after his discharge from the Army. Fred's father, Gustav, was born in 1858, 3 years after the family's immigration to the United States. He and his 5 brothers and 4 sisters were raised in a heavily German Wisconsin community. The family's patriarch, Martin Friedrich, obtained land near Neshkoro under the provisions of the Homestead Act of 1862. Like many Americans in this era, the Klucks were in search of land. Martin Friedrich's oldest son, Gustav, obtained title to a homestead near Eau Claire, Wisconsin in 1886. He probably settled the homestead in 1881, 2 years before the birth of his first child, Frederick Christopher. Motivated by the prospects of free land, the Klucks were attracted to the opening of Oklahoma. Some of the family moved to the Enid area several years after the run into the Cherokee Outlet in 1893, but other members of the family, including Gustav, remained in Wisconsin until the lottery for the land of the Kiowa Comanche Reservation in 1901. Hugh Corwin, in a 1959 biographical sketch of Fred and Gladys, wrote that Gustav didn't draw a low enough number to secure free land in that opening and returned to Wisconsin. But his oldest son, 17-year-old Frederick, moved to Lawton in December of 1901. In October of the next year, Gustav bought a relinquishment to 160 acres southeast of Lawton, a mushrooming town that sprang from the plains on August 6, 1901, the day of the land opening. By the time the Phelps post office closed in 1904, Gustav had invested in a grocery store in Lawton, operated by his younger brother, William Theodore, at 219 East Avenue. Fred worked there as a delivery man. The position also included taking orders from the town cafes. The store's location was in the heart of the community's commercial district and is now the southern entrance of Lawton's Central Mall. Fred's Uncle William, who was a member of Lawton City Council, invested heavily in a hospital for the indigent. When county checks for payment of patient care proved uncashable, William went bankrupt and moved to El Centro, California. Fred also went west about the same time and worked several jobs. By the time he left Lawton, Fred Kluck and Gladys Ellison had a romantic attachment that survived a 14-month separation. Gladyson's American roots went deeper than her future husband's, going back 10 generations to William Bradford and the Mayflower in 1620. Within months of the run into the unassigned land of Oklahoma on April 22, 1889, Gladys's great-grandfather, William V. Wolfe, began homesteading a claim just northeast of the town of Marshall in Logan County. William's granddaughter, Sarah Marie Sadie Cleveland, married a cowman named John Sherman Ellison on November 20th, 1889, in Stanley, Nebraska. She gave birth to a daughter, Gladys Ellison, on February 29th, 1892, in the log cabin of her grandfather near Marshall in Oklahoma Territory. 16 months earlier, in October of 1890, Sadie had given birth to a son who lived less than 2 months. The delivery of two children in little over a year and the hardship of life on the frontier may have taken a toll on her health. Her hometown newspaper reported her death at the age of 25. The Pond Creek Echo of February 2nd, 1894.
It becomes the sad duty of the Echo to chronicle the death of Mrs. J. S. Ellison, which occurred Monday morning at 8:10. Mrs. Ellison, on Saturday evening, feeling unwell, took a dose of the Mexican golden herb cure and did not dilute it according to directions, but took an overdose. Dr. Johnson was called about 9 and administered emetics. At 1:30 Monday morning, the doctor was again summoned as she had spasms. Dr. Easter of Round Pond also arrived around 3 a.m., but a consultation only showed that nothing could be done. The poison had entered the system before an emetic was given. She passed away about 8 a.m. Monday. The body was shipped to Hennessy Tuesday morning and was interred at Marshall, Oklahoma Territory. This unfortunate case should serve as a warning that care should be used in following directions in taking medicine.
Another article in the Pond Creek News of February 3rd was equally graphic.
A fatal accident. Mrs. J. S. Ellison passed over the Dark River last Monday morning from the effects of an overdose taken accidentally of Mexican golden herb root cure, a patent medicine. She leaves a husband and one child, a little girl of 2 years, to mourn her departure from the mortal to the immortal state.
Gladys Ellison's father wasn't equipped to cope with an infant daughter and turned over the task of raising her to his mother-in-law, Mary Wolfe Cleveland. He remarried in 1896, moved to Illinois, and eventually to North Dakota, where he homesteaded 160 acres of land about 8 miles north of Williston. His health deteriorated, and he died there in 1908, leaving Gladys's stepmother, Myrtle Ellison, and 3 half-sisters, Cecil, Ruth, and May. With no family nearby, they moved to California and stayed in contact with Gladys until her death. Gladys's first recollections are of living with her grandmother at the home of her great-grandparents, William and Sarah Wolfe, near Marshall. The 1900 census shows the 4 still living on the Wolfe claim when Gladys was 8 years old. It's hard today to understand the attraction of land on the pioneer Americans, but in studying the family, the lure of the land was a major influence on all of its branches. The 1901 economic opportunities associated with the opening of the Kiowa Comanche Reservation not only captured the imagination of the Klucks, it also attracted Gladys's family. In May of 1901, before the opening, they moved to Duncan. In early August, they traveled to Cache Creek in a caravan of 7 teams with all of their household goods and groceries, but had to wait there until after the drawing and sale of town lots. William V. Wolfe purchased a town lot in Lawton at auction for $105. They were unlikely pioneers. Gladys was 9, her grandmother, Mary Cleveland, was 54, William 84, and his wife Sarah was 10 years younger. The adults had already settled 2 or 3 earlier frontiers, from Missouri and Iowa to Kansas and Oklahoma Territory. Why they left a farm near Marshall they'd worked for a dozen years baffles their descendants. But the lure of cheap land and a new frontier had a powerful attraction for many generations of American pioneers. 50 years later, Gladys wrote a poem entitled Memories of 1901, featured prominently in a semicentennial publication entitled "'Neath August Sun, 1901, describing her pioneering experiences that captures the mood of the time.
It was August the 6th, 1901. This good town had just begun. People came far and near and pitched their tents most everywhere. There were no railroads for miles around. They hauled the lumber from Marlowtown to build a house at 1011E, a home for Grandma, my parents, and me.
The last line rhymes, but it's not accurate. While it was a home for Grandma and me, her parents weren't there. To be precise, she should have said my great-grandparents, but that would have destroyed the meter. She continued,
Our drinking water we had to buy. Maybe you think it was not high. 25 cents we had to pay to get a barrel every day. Then soon germs were discovered. Some typhoid patients never recovered. I myself had quite a spell, but I finally did get well.
in an account of the history of the Lawton Methodist Episcopal Church South. Gladys provides more details about Lawton's early days.
Many left here for the going was rough. The weather was hot, water scarce, and wind and dust storms were numerous. All lived in tents until houses could be built. Lumber had to be hauled in. There were no roads, no modern conveniences such as sidewalks, lights, running water, telephones, and so forth. The weather was hot and dry, and when it did rain, it made the stickiest mud you ever saw. The wind would blow the tents down. We didn't have so much entertainment there as now, but I think we enjoyed more what we did have, like picnics and parties.
When Fred and Gladys met is unknown, but in her job as a cook for the prisoners at the Comanche County Jail, Mary Cleveland probably purchased groceries from Fred. Mary Hudson Smith, daughter of Fred and Gladys, recalled that Gladys's grandmother, Mary Cleveland, knew Fred, liked him, and may have encouraged the match. The reason Fred went to California is also murky. The bankruptcy of the Klucks grocery may have been a factor. The economic opportunities produced by the devastation of San Francisco and the 1906 earthquake may have also been a consideration. Dozens of postcards between Fred and Gladys during their separation shed little light on this period in their relationship. Fred never mentioned how he was employed in California, although in one card he mentioned that he was changing jobs. A family photograph shows him working in a cafe in San Francisco. Before Fred went to California, Gladys's great-grandfather, William V. Wolfe, died on November 21, 1907, without a will. In late July of the next year, his daughter, Mary Cleveland, was appointed administratrix by the court. An inventory of William's property revealed that he left an estate of less than $1,500. Legal notices were published in the local newspapers advising anyone with a claim against the estate to file it with Mary within 4 months of the publication of the notice, which appeared first in the Lawton Constitution on December 31, 1908. Apparently, someone filed a claim, for in a postcard marked March 30th, 1909, Gladys informed Fred,
Grandma is awful low. I have been up every night for a week and have a dreadful headache today and have to go to the court for that pesky trial.
Whatever the litigation was about, the family prevailed, for her next card to Fred, also postmarked March 30th, 1909, said,
Grandma is not any better. She don't notice anything. That trial is over at last. I went down yesterday. Grandma was not able to go, but all our witnesses were there, and Dr. Gouch testified for her, and we won out all okay. Uncle John and his wife were there.
Mary Cleveland's health was no better by early April, and Gladys, who had not been feeling well for days, said her weight had declined to 103.5 pounds. She was cheered by Fred's plan to return to Lawton after a while. Gladys inquired how long that was and informed Fred.
Grandma said she wished you were here to help take care of her.
After a while, turned out to be 6 months, but Mary's health began to improve, and Gladys finally was able to get out of the house, although she claimed she had been cooped up so long she barely knew how to act. About this time she received word from her recently widowed stepmother that she and her 3 children would be reaching Stockton on April 6th. Their arrival gave Gladys justification to plan a trip to California, and Fred, who seemed to have been growing lonely, was cheered by the prospect of her arrival. In his next card he wrote,
Glad to hear you are busy getting ready to come to Frisco. Hope it won't take you very long. What kind of a dress are you making? One to wear in the daytime or... Well, I will not try to guess for fear of being in the wrong.
As April neared its end, Fred wrote that he was still in San Francisco and waiting to hear that Gladys had started for California or was preparing to do so. Something real or imagined caused Fred to fear that he had irritated Gladys, and he exhorted,
You must not fail to write to me if you are a little angry at me.
The rift, if it actually existed, was short-lived, judging from the sentiment on the front of Gladys's card. She informed Fred that she had finished a day dress and would make another later. By and large, the postcards focused almost exclusively on the activities of the writer's friends and family. But later in May, Fred mentioned Teddy Roosevelt's slaughter of game on the former president's African safari and speculated that the price of circus tickets might go up. The couple maintained a steady exchange of cards and letters, which indicated a void and frustration in both lives caused by the separation. In early June, Fred reported that he had just returned from several days in Stockton where he had had a dandy time. While he didn't say, he was visiting Myrtle Ellison and her daughters, who had arrived at the home of her parents following the death of Gladys's father at the age of 42 in North Dakota. Later in the month, back in San Francisco, Fred wrote Gladys, whom he called Sis, that he would like to eat an ice cream with her and asked, How about it? Would you give me a big dish? In another card, he assured her that she was remembered and expressed the hope that she would
decide to come and see me before long.
Apparently, Fred had gotten along well with Myrtle Ellison and her daughters, for he returned in early July and had a glorious 4th. After Independence Day, Gladys told Fred, whom she addressed as Dear Boy, that she and her friend Bertie, Beatrice Woody from Cement, would start for California in 2 months, if not sooner, and assured him,
I am not joking this time.
In early August, an anxious Fred asked,
When are you going to come to California? Or are you on your way? Now, don't change your mind and don't forget to write.
As the weeks passed and Gladys didn't start for California, Fred's mood sagged. In a card addressed to Babe, he wrote,
This is Sunday, and don't know how lonesome I am. I'm certainly getting tired of lazing around, as nothing wears a person out more than running around doing nothing. We'll be glad when you get out here.
Days later, Fred learned that Gladys was definitely coming to Stockton in early October. While Bertie probably accompanied her, she's not mentioned in the correspondence, and no account of the trip has been found. Gladys arrived before October 11th, and Fred wrote that he intended to come to Stockton on the 16th. He probably visited Stockton as often as his job permitted. A card postmarked in November recorded that he
got back all right, but am so lonesome, don't know what to do with myself.
Gladys remained in Stockton for about a month, but was back in Lawton by mid-November. She and Fred may have returned together, for a postcard to Myrtle Ellison, dated November 16th, from Fred, mailed at McFarland, Kansas, reported that it has been snowing
ever since the afternoon of the day we left.
The couple had decided to marry, but correspondence available provides few details. Gladys's Aunt Frances mailed a postcard from Perry, Oklahoma on December 20th, promising to meet her niece at the train with a preacher ready. The plans changed, for the couple obtained their license on Christmas Day from a Noble County judge who married them the next day at the home of Gladys's Aunt Frances. She and her husband, Jim Teague, witnessed the ceremony. If there was a honeymoon, it was brief. In a card postmarked December 31st, addressed to Mrs. Gladys Kluck, Aunt Frances and Perry said,
"Glad you got home all right."
The couple moved into Mary Cleveland's home on E Street in Lawton. Fred returned to the work he knew in a grocery store at 117 C Avenue. Business in that period changed hands frequently and pay was low. An offer of an additional $1 a week was enough to prompt him to change jobs. Over the next few years, Fred worked for at least half a dozen grocery stores and as a delivery man for 2 bakeries. In 1912, he took an examination for letter carrier for the U.S. Post Office, making a perfect score on the math section of the test. In 1913, he began delivering mail twice daily with a horse-drawn wagon. He held that job for 30 years, retiring in 1943. In the 10 years after their marriage, the couple had 5 children, all delivered in the family home at 1011 E. Velma Irene, the first, arrived in 1910. Gladys Louise followed 2 years later in 1912. 3 years separated the Klucks' only son, Frederick Valance, born in 1915, from his sisters on either side. Ruby Maxine appeared in the final year of World War I, and Mary Caroline, named for great-grandmothers on both sides of the family, ended Gladys's decade of childbearing in 1920. Like the children of Lake Wobegon, all were above average. Although the Kluck name and German ancestry provoked some concern during the period of super-patriotic fervor that accompanied America's entry into the World War, the family's deep roots in the community and the reputation of the Kluck men prevented any serious harassment. The older children did experience teasing from their classmates, but saddled with the Kluck name, they were already accustomed to childish jibes and taunts of dumb Klucks. Although Fred was 34 and the father of 3 children when the war began, he had to register for the draft, although he was never called for service. In 1923, Mary Cleveland died. The next year, Fred sold her house and bought a home across the alley at 1014D, the family home the Kluck cousins remember from their childhood. Life became difficult for Americans following the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression that dominated the decade of the 30s. With his steady job at the post office, Fred and his family were secure. All the children completed high school, went to college, and led productive lives. Fred and Gladys played a significant role in their churches, St. John Lutheran and Centenary Methodist, and were proud of their role in pioneering Lawton. N. Scott Momaday, a Kiowa novelist and poet, maintains that people live as long as they're remembered. Fred, Gladys, and their children remain alive in the memories of all the Kluck cousins. Although no one in the room is now named Kluck, we were all shaped by our shared grandparents and their children. The Kluck family tree now has too many branches to follow, but we can trace its growth into the next generation photographically.
On the old farmhouse veranda, there sat Silas and Miranda, thinking of the days gone by. Said he, dearie, don't be weary, you were always bright and cheery, but a tear now dims your eye. Said she, they're tears of gladness, Silas, they're not tears of sadness. It is 50 years today since we were wed. And the old man's dim eye brightened, and his stern old heart it lightened, as he turned to her and said, put on your old grey bonnet, with the blue ribbon on it, while I hitch old Job into the chair, and through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on our golden wedding day. Put on your old grey bonnet, with the blue ribbon on it, while I hitch old Job into the chair, and through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on our golden wedding day. It was in the same old bonnet with the same blue ribbon on it, in the old chair by his side, that he drove her up to Dover through the same old fields of clover to become his happy bride. The birds were sweetly singing and the same old bells were ringing as they passed the quaint old church where they were wed. And that night when stars were gleaming, the old couple lay a-dreaming, dreaming of the words he said. Put on your old grey bonnet with the blue ribbon on it while I hitch old Dob into the chair. And through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on our golden wedding day. Put on your old grey bonnet with the blue ribbon on it while I hitch old Dob into the chair. And through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on our golden wedding day.
Dreaming of you, that's all I do. Night and day for you, I'm pining.
And in your eyes, blue as the sky, I can see the love light softly shining. Because you love me, there it seems.
Pray meet me in the land of dreams. Meet me tonight in dreamland under the silvery moon. Meet me tonight in dreamland where love's sweet roses bloom. Come with the love light gleaming in your dear eyes of blue. Meet me in dreamland, sweet dreamy dreamland. There let my dreams come true.
Late past seen, dark, silvery moon is shining through the trees. Past to me, you, sound of kisses floating on the breeze. Act one, begun, dialogue, where would you like to spoon? My view with you underneath a silvery moon. By the light of the silvery moon, I want to spoon. To my honey I'll croon love's tune. Honeymoon, keep a shining in June. Your silvery beams will bring love dreams. We'll be cuddling soon by the silvery moon. By the light of the silvery moon, I want to spoon. tune, love tune, honeymoon. Keep a shining in June. Your silvery beams will bring love dreams. We'll be cuddling soon by the silvery moon.
Oh my honey, better hurry and let me and ain't you going to the leader man, ragged meter man? Oh my honey, let me take you to Alexander's grandstand, a brass band. Ain't you coming along? Come on in here, Alexander's ragtime band. Come on in here. It's the best band in the land. They can play a bugle call like you never heard before. So natural that you want to go to war. That's just the bestest band. What am? Oh, honey lamb, come on along. Let me take you by the hand. Up to the man, the funny man, who's the leader of the band. And if you care to hear the Swanee River played in ragtime, come on in here, Alexander.